Let's talk about how to bid government commercial cleaning contracts. Hey, I'm Matt, your 7-figure commercial cleaning CEO, and in this video, we're gonna unpack how do you find, how do you bid, how do you successfully submit and calculate the quotes for commercial cleaning contracts for government entities. Now, winning government contracts can be extremely lucrative, and it can be a very fast way to grow your business. Also, they tend to have extended contract periods beyond just a year. They can go as long as 5 years at a time. They can also be fantastic references to use for winning other clients in your area. And I'm actually gonna open up some details from a big government bid that we just did so that you can see exactly what you need to think through, prepare for, questions to ask, and questions to have answers for whenever you do take part in one of these. So with that, let's dive right in. How do you first find these government contracts? Well, we need to recognize that there is typically in the United States 4 different layers of government in general. At the first layer, you've got your city, town, your locality. Then you've got your county, which would be number 2. Then you have your state as number 3, and then the federal government as number 4. Now, all of these, except for the federal government, has a unique way of approaching them based on the state and county and the city that you live in. And for the purpose of this video, we're gonna focus mostly on the local government contracts, like your city, like your county, and like your state. The federal is a whole different ballgame that we'll make a separate video for. So as far as finding these local contracts, you need to check with each of the departments in your area. So call your local city hall, call your local town hall, call whatever municipality you live in and ask them for their vendor relations department, or the other job titles you can look for is buyer, purchaser, or asset manager. You can follow this same process when it comes to the county and for your state. And typically the way that it's set up is they're gonna give you access to a registration website, and they're gonna put you into their vendor portal. As a vendor inside of their buyer's portal or their purchasing portal, you're gonna be able to sign up to receive notifications for certain bids that the government is putting out there that they need work done for. So it's really important that you go ahead and take this opportunity to set up email notifications. You might want to create a specific tag in your email address. That's what I have done, that is dedicated just to state contracts, just to county contracts, and just to local city contracts. Now, along with this, each of these government entities are gonna give you a different ID that's gonna be tied to you as a vendor. So be sure to also store that in a completely separate and secure location where you can make sure that you know what your city's vendor ID is for you and your state and your county. Keep your login information separate for each of their portals. And just because you're receiving email notifications about bid opportunities doesn't mean that you won't ever have to log in and use your portal again. I know that here in North Carolina, you have to log in to your portal to upload your documents to actually officially submit your bid in some situations. So protect this information, be ready to use it, practice logging in and out. I know that government systems, they can be complicated sometimes. And here's a pro tip. Just because they're a government entity and they're gonna make decisions through this really thorough bureaucratic process doesn't mean that personal relationships don't matter. So for your city and for your county, it might be a good idea to stop by the buyer department to meet the manager or the asset manager over their facilities, at least shake their hand, get your card in their hand, say hey, bring them a gift, do something so that they at least are aware of you, so that when you do come to the bids or the walkthroughs and you do submit your proposals, there's some sort of reference about you specifically above the other vendors that they have an anchor for. Again, that can be a little complicated when it comes to government, but it's worth a try. And if you are successful with it, it can pay off big time. Okay, so now that you're all set up, you can use the portal and go ahead and look for active opportunities that are still open that you may have missed the announcement for. And by the way, to actually find these, you may want to look under custodial services, and the other one would be janitorial services. They're typically not going to list under the phrase commercial cleaning services. So focus on custodial or janitorial. And then once you're all caught up with finding out what opportunities there are out there, now we can let the notifications keep us in the loop on what's to come. And that leads us to the next part, which is what happens whenever a bid does open up and what do we need to do? Well, the state or the county or the city is going to release what's called an RFP or an RFQ. An RFP means request for purchase. RFQ is request for quote. And the distinction between these is an RFP typically means they are ready to buy now. They're going to get their prices and they're going to go through their purchasing process and make a selection. But an RFQ can sometimes be them wanting to know what the cost is in the market out there for what they're looking for, and they want to get a guesstimate of what it's going to take budget-wise for them to make sure it gets done. So they're putting out an RFQ for a quote, and maybe they might not make a purchasing decision for a year or many years to come, or just a few months later. So keep that in mind whenever you see one of these opportunities come up, if it's issued as an RFP or an RFQ. Now, when the government does issue one of these opportunities, you'll need to log into the portal typically to download their specific document for that opportunity. And the first thing you want to do when looking at this document is to look for site visit information. Sometimes the site visit is going to be optional. A lot of times it's going to be required. And they're going to have a sign-in sheet whenever you do attend the site visit. And anybody who submits a proposal that did not attend the site visit is immediately going to be rejected. So it's really important that you look at the site visit time, date, procedure, schedule, because the government can be very funny sometimes depending on what building it is as far as how much preparation needs to go into a site visit. Do you need pre-approval? Do you need security clearance? All kinds of different things that you might need to be ready to do before showing up. It's not as simple sometimes as seeing that it's 11 o'clock on a Monday and just showing up at 11 o'clock on a Monday. You'll need to make sure you understand their procedures. And before we do dive into the site visit itself, it's really important to know that you do need to read this document. It is a big document. I understand that. I've read through them as well. But there's going to be opportunities for questions and answers and opportunities for you to stand out as a vendor. They're not always going to go with the lowest price vendor. They're usually going to have a formula inside the document showing how much weight they're going to give to certain aspects of your company. So you know how to set the game up in your favor if you do read this document. And not only this, they're going to have a list of other requirements they might want included with the proposal. So you'll be able to see the specifics of what they're really looking for so that when you are on site walking through, you can ask very insightful questions. Okay, so now we can jump into the walkthrough. It's time to show up. You follow their procedures. You're there on site. Typically, they are going to have a sign-in sheet with your company name. And something funny that a lot of government entities do is they will email that sign-in sheet to everybody who attends there, because typically there's going to be multiple competitors that are going to be going to these government bids. Now, don't let that intimidate you. That is completely normal because a lot of people are in the notification systems for these opportunities. So there's a lot of people that also don't show up to these. And there are plenty of cases where it's a required site visit and nobody else shows up and you might be the only one there. So it makes the bidding process a lot more smooth. But most likely there are going to be other companies with their representatives attending these bids. And if you own your commercial cleaning company, it is an advantage for you to be the one to attend there, depending on the size and scope of the project. It's impressive to the state or to the local county or to the city whenever the owner of the company shows up for these. But if you have a sales representative, you can absolutely let them attend these and run through these. It does help, though, if the owner does make face. This is especially effective when it comes to your city and your county government contracts because they like to use local companies. We've had companies from way out of state, on other sides of the country. We've had representatives from their companies attend our local government contract bids. And I haven't really heard of them winning very many. They prefer to choose local companies. So do your best during this walkthrough to be engaging, to ask questions. If you're going to be silent most of the time, at least be confidently silent. Don't look totally lost because they are going to remember you. They're going to tie your proposal to who you are and their experience with you during this walkthrough. And this just might be me and my personality, but I like to at least make some sort of impression. You can choose what kind of impression you want to make on the state representative, which is typically the buyer or purchaser agent that's going to be attending the walkthrough and guiding it. But I like to either be the one who asks the first question or sticks around and asks a few questions after, or asks different styles of questions and sometimes steers away from the basic business questions. I want to know a little bit about them and how long they've been at their job, what it's like working there. So I want to make some sort of memory and craft that memory for them so that whenever they see my company's name and my name, they remember us, and they feel how it was to experience at least walking through the building with us, and they're gonna attribute that to what it's like to work with us. So I encourage you, be the one that's shaking hands first, be the one that's asking the questions first, be the one that does say, I'd like to see an area. Because a lot of times they'll say, the representative walking you through a building will say, do y'all need to see the basement of this facility? And if it's on the scope and you've read through the documents, then yeah, I want to see it. But a lot of people don't speak up in those scenarios. It's good if you do. Sorry, I've had my computer up this whole time. That's better. Okay, so now that you've completed the walkthrough, maybe you've asked some questions. They typically do have a period for questions where you can email in and ask questions. Something I like to know is if they're going to share the answers to those questions with everybody else that's bidding. Typically they do. So during that walkthrough that we just did, the questions that I want to ask that I don't want my competitors to hear, I try to find opportunities to ask those things semi-privately. You know, if I can catch them in passing as we're turning a hallway and just say, hey, I had a quick question, just a moment. Something really casual like that. Something that's not going to let them turn around and announce it to the whole room. Sometimes they do, or it's not going to get emailed out to everybody. So there is a strategy to when you ask questions and in what format you do that. They're going to have this format here where you can email them in, and most likely they're going to email them out to the rest of the bidders. Here's a list of questions that some of the vendors had asked during a large government bid that we just did. How frequently are events held in the event center? If there are no dumpsters at all the different buildings on this campus, how is that handled? Who takes it where? Is there a custodial closet in every building? How many custodial staff are currently operating on campus? Can an office be provided on campus for the awarded contractor's management? And that's a cool one because a lot of these larger government bids, like this was for a community college, they will have a lot of space. And if you can have a designated office space just for your site manager that's dedicated just to that one account, it really helps with efficiencies a lot. What are the parameters for shifts? Is there a need for a day shift and a night shift, or can it all be done either in the day or the night? Are there any required numbers of employees that the contractor must provide on site? Are parking permits required to park at this facility? If so, what's the procedure for getting set up with permits? Will the awarded contractor provide all the consumables? And just to clarify, consumables in our world and in my language means can liners, which are trash bags, bathroom tissue, toilet paper, paper towels, things like that that get used up by the facility and its occupants during their operations. So this question is, do we provide that if we were to win this contract? Is there washer and dryer access on site? This is an especially good question for these very large government contracts because they can require so much microfiber and linens at times for the cleaning procedures, and if you're taking care of any residential areas, that you want to be able to wash on site and use their facilities. And this follow-up question to that is, if they don't have it on site, are they able to provide the proper space, hookups, and ventilation for washers and dryers? What are the current struggles that your facility is facing with current custodial services? If we are required to pay for and provide the consumable products, do you want that rolled into the monthly pricing, or is that going to be billed separately? And by the way, typically in government contracts, it is rolled into the monthly price. Are employees that we would put on site required to wear any sort of identification or badges? If so, what is the cost for providing those badges if it's something that the facility must issue? Can you please provide a list of holidays observed by the facility? And a follow-up question to those holidays is, will the facility allow the awarded vendor to perform work in the facility on those holidays? Oh, here's one that can sneak up on you. Is the awarded vendor required to set up and break down any tables, chairs, and move furniture on a regular basis? Now, this next question is a really good one, especially if you are bidding on a school or an event center, is for them to provide the schedule of those events or the classrooms so that you can best plan staffing. Another is, and this is especially applicable to large campuses, is can the contractor or the awarded vendor provide golf carts? And if so, where can they park those? They don't have to be golf carts, but any sort of vehicle that's small that can be used to carry supplies from building to building. Ooh, and here's a good one. Is all new equipment required to be provided by the vendor? Or is the facility open to the vendor using the equipment that's already on site? Now, if you are required to provide the consumable products at the facility, you can ask this question. Can you, the facility, provide the current budget for those consumable products, or send us a list or a register showing the past 12 months worth of purchases? All you can do at that point is put your own pricing in there, talk to your supplier, or you can match what they've got going on and use the same supplier that they're using. It's up to you, but now you have a record and something to go off of for that budget. Can you supply a copy of the current contract? Surprisingly, a lot of government contracts will, because they're public knowledge. Which even gets into, you can potentially get what they're actually paying right now or have paid in the past for those contracts. Are there any specific brands of cleaning chemicals that the facility is currently using or that the contractor needs to use or avoid using? And then another good question is getting a head count for that facility. How much visitor traffic does it get? How many employees are there, so that you can better gauge the amount of soil and debris and workload that's going to be created because of all that traffic. Whew, that was a lot of questions, but there are great examples of things that you can ask whenever walking through the facility or during that Q&A section. Now, those were ones that were asked by other vendors that got sent and shared publicly with me and with everybody else. Some of the questions that I was asking privately were along the lines of, what do you think it should take to clean this building? How many staff would you like to see in here cleaning? What triggered y'all to put this up for bid again instead of renewing with your previous contractor? Those are the kind of questions I like to ask in person as privately as possible, either during the walkthrough, before the walkthrough, or after the walkthrough. Now, when it comes to actually calculating the price for one of these contracts, typically they will give you a good indication from the questions I just told you about what they expect or what's currently been going on. And something that I like to use for larger government bids is to think, how many full-timers will this take? And then I'll take our formula referenced in our quote video, which you can go watch at any time, and add on how much profitability I want to have based on the size of the account. So now it's time to actually put this proposal together, and I'm going to read you some of the items that we had to put together for this government bid. It's broken down into two main sections. The first section being project organization. They want to know what your plan is when you're going to approach this facility. They're really trying to gauge how well you actually know your stuff. So here are the different things that you need to plan on. The first one is staffing plan and policies. So here's some of the questions under that they wanted answered. Explain the staffing and management plan for our facility. So what are we going to do to be recruiting for this? What are we going to be doing to hold people accountable? When are we going to let people go? What's our order of discipline? Things like that. The next question under this section is provide an organizational chart for our facility. So if it's a pretty large facility that's going to have an account manager at it or any sort of level of supervisors, you're just essentially showing them, okay, so here's the area supervisor that might be over this area. Then there's also this person right here that works under them, and they are only on site at your facility. Then they might have two assistants that work with them. Then there might be the rest of the employees under them, or it might be very simple and straightforward linear organizational chart. It's however you decide to set it up, and use that as an opportunity to flex your knowledge about what it would take to manage cleaning for them. And this last one under the staffing plan and policies is please provide the personnel handbook. So your policy and procedures manual, your employee handbook that outlines the benefits package, paid sick leave, paid vacations. They wanted to know that we have everything ironed out as far as who's going to be working in their facility, how they're going to be taken care of, what are the expectations and the rules that they need to follow. So we included an entire copy of that just for them in the bid. So that's the first part of project organization, is your staffing plan and policies. The next part that they wanted to know is the operations plan and the policies there. So you got to answer questions like this. Explain your quality control procedures. Next, explain how the vendor will be accountable or held accountable for any service problems or failures. Next would be explain the emergency cleaning procedures. Now, what are emergency cleaning procedures? We typically treat that as maybe there's some sort of biohazard, whether that is from blood, vomit, feces. What is the procedure that's going to be used and followed by your staff to handle that situation? Following that question about emergency cleaning procedures is include the training plans and procedures that will be implemented at the facility. Include the topics that will be covered. Present a roster as an example roster that's going to be used to give to the facility whenever new employees are coming in, showing that they've been trained and they've been checked off and signed off on that. Now, a note on this training plans piece is this can be a little bit redundant because we did in our proposal talk about the training program a little bit in our staffing and management plan, because training is a really integral part to how you're going to manage and staff a facility. But we went in more detail during that specific question right here with the training plans. Next to last here on the operations plan and policies is list the grades, qualities, and brand name of the chemicals. And then they actually said in their bid, we prefer green chemicals and clean chemicals to be used on our facility's campus. So all you need to do is put your chemicals into a chart, list them out, list the grades, list any information you want to share about them, and if they're green or not, and you can send that over. And the last one in this operations plan and policy section, which is also the last one for this whole project organization section, is explain the security plans and procedures. So how do they know whenever they give you keys to these facilities that everything's going to be okay? How do they know who has what keys? What are your procedures when inside the facility to keep it safe? What are the procedures whenever locking up? What if there is an incident? Who gets reported to? What if there's an alarm issue? So you need to explain each of the security scenarios and your default standard security procedure in such a way that's going to be satisfactory for them to feel like if everything's going to be safe and taken care of, nothing's going to get stolen, and how are staff going to communicate should there be a security issue. So that's project organization and the questions that you may need to answer in your bids, and go ahead and start working on with your company. Have these policies already written out and handled. This next one, which is the last major one they wanted answered, is the technical approach. So the first question they wanted to know here was equipment and supplies. Please provide what type of equipment will be used in maintaining our facility. Now this is different than the chemicals list because this is equipment specifically. So if you just have an equipment list, you can use that. We've got a free equipment list whenever you go check out the Commercial Cleaning CEO website. You can start there. The next question is list the consumables that will be used, because in this bid, we do have to pay for the consumables. So all that we did is we took the list that they gave us and said, we'll just give you those consumables, but we also provided a few extra ones that we think they needed after doing the walkthrough. Now this last question under this equipment and supplies section was provide documentation of how the vendor will follow APPA custodial standards. What is APPA? APPA stands for the Association of Physical Plant Administrators. Now in this specific bid, that is a really popular association for community colleges and any sort of educational facilities. So to give you the short version of the APPA custodial standards, there are 5 different levels, with 1 being the highest, 5 being the lowest. What we needed to demonstrate is that we were going to keep them at a level 1, and if for any reason we dropped to level 2, what we were going to do to bring things to a level 1 again. And a quick Google search will show you how each of these standards are laid out and what the expectations are at each of them. Okay, back to our last question here on the proposal list, which was please provide a schedule showing how the employees will be distributed among every building throughout the campus. So they wanted us to demonstrate our ability to handle the logistics and the workload and to provide the different staffing layers that are going to be needed to make sure that this thing works. Okay, so now from all of these questions and from all the stuff that they've asked us for, just so that you're aware, this proposal that we submitted to them was over 100 pages. But it included things like our policy and procedure manual, right? Those kind of things take up quite a few pages, and lots of other things where we write down our procedures. So these proposals can be really thick. What do we do now? It's not as simple as just emailing it in. You want to be sure that you read the RFP or the RFQ and their submission requirements. I distinctly remember we helped someone with a government bid, but they did not submit the bid the way that the government wanted it. They wanted one submission on a flash drive with certain pages of it in hard copy in a folder. Then they wanted a different kind that's totally paper inside of a binder, and they wanted that submitted to someone else at a different place. All these were due at the same time of day, and they can be really, really funny about how they want to receive the proposal. So you need to be absolutely clear and absolutely sure that you read through the submission requirements early on. This is why you got to read that RFP or RFQ right away, so that when you're on site and something sounds a little unclear as far as how they want to receive your bid, you can clear that up. So this bid that we presented, they wanted 2 copies printed out completely, so that was really thick. We had to print over 200 pages, put them in manila envelopes that were really big. We had to put a certain name and a certain style of sticker on the front with everything listed out in a certain order and turn them both into the same person. And to make this even more zesty is the time from walkthrough to the time when bids were due was about a week. So you got to be sure that you are on your game whenever you're doing these government bids. That's why go back, rewatch this video, think through the questions, have your policies and procedures answerable whenever you go through those questions. If you want to know more details on how to price bids like these and any account size, go watch this video where I break down my quote formula and even give you a free calculator to use to help you win more and more commercial cleaning clients.